Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Gilliland. I am one of the founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks. Thank you for joining us for our continuing analysis of Skeleton Crew. We're taking on episode 7, which does have some interesting legal questions about being close enough, whether or not that's fun contract interpretation. So let's dive in. With me on this adventure is retired Judge Matthew Sciarrino from his Star Wars compound in Florida. And joining me from Northern California is Stephen Tolafield. Having lots of SoCal friends. I really wish all of them the best. I've been worried about them, worried about my brother. Lots of scary news down south, and really hope everyone's safe. Or if they need anything, say so. And because asking what there are ways to help, and being available is one of them. So, with that, let's dive into episode 7. And Your Honor, what did you think of episode 7?
It was a great episode, and I'm looking forward to the conclusion. I'm hearing it's going to be a longer episode, the final episode, which is going to be very, very nice. And I also would like to send my condolences to all of those affected in California. Those of us on the East Coast are far away, but we certainly have been following in the news, and the pictures are just beyond words how devastating it looks. And I can't even imagine what it must be like in reality, and it's almost too horrible to contemplate. And I've seen some horrible things from September 11th and its aftermath, which I was there for. But the just the scale of the destruction here is just absolutely incredible.
That's um, had a text from my brother where he's in Northridge, and they can see the flames on the mountaintops. So like it's like leave. It's very scary for everyone down there. Stephen, thoughts on the episode? And I know you have SoCal connections as well.
Yeah, I just hope everyone's safe. Like you said, the coverage is just appallingly scary. And definitely sending everyone good thoughts and to wish everyone to be safe. Don't be a hero. And please protect yourselves and your families. And reach out for help for sure. But turning to the episode, yes, it was a very exciting show. We finally get back to Ad Aden and kind of learn about its secrets a little bit more. So that was very exciting to see. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it.
Well, let's move with all deliberate speed. So there's some serious information security protocols on Aten because we go to the parents and they're trying to launch a communications buoy, and it does look like a little buoy or the ship from ET, and that's cute. To send out information that doesn't violate security protocols, but it does come close. And we do find out that somehow the security droids are able to detect a secure or a communication device. It wasn't even transmitting yet.
And
They're
like
able,
fast. They were like
yeah,
right there.
the parents are surrounded, and we do learn that they don't use lethal force. But we have people getting stunned left and right in this pass the baton, uh, montage that we have with the different parents being able to launch the buoy. And I mean, Neil's mom it's her idea. I'm going to run for it, and she gets zapped immediately, and maybe moved a foot. And it's the other parents who get it across the finish line with, Farah being the one who doesn't get stunned. But everyone else, takes a bolt and takes a nap. And that raises lots of issues because, like, it's one thing to have a blackout requirement, something that we did during World War II, again, something along that happened along, the coasts of the United States. being able, we're blackout curtains, lights not on, we're not going to make it easy for bombers, and being able to say we're keeping everyone safe. And like those were ordinances, like we have a blackout requirement. They have a permanent communications blackout. And that's surreal to comprehend that under no circumstances will a message go out unless the supervisor okays it. So just want to get your reactions to this very aggressive communications policy that they have that justifies non-lethal force to subdue people trying to communicate out. And Your Honor, do you have any thoughts on this?
I too very much got the ET vibes from the device, and it was only just missing the speak and spell and the phone home, that's the exact same thing, that thought that I had when I first saw the device that they were doing. I put the planet akin to a corporation and a business, since they all seem to work for the exact same business, which appears to be this mint. So I think of it more of as a corporate policy and a corporate blackout, and I think there is certainly a tradition of such things in classified businesses or businesses that deal with the Department of Defense and anything along those lines in high security. And I think a mint probably would qualify for that. Uh, so looking at it on that end, I don't really have a problem with the blackout. As far as the use of the non-lethal force, every time I see these stun guns, it's like my hope and desire that someday we will have not just for the electric stun probes that we can send out to people, but a real stun gun, because it would save a lot of people's lives with regards to same. In New York, a police officer can use lethal force if the suspect is attempting to or did in fact commit a felony, or if there's an imminent threat of serious physical injury or death to the officer or to others. Non-lethal force they can use for even misdemeanors. And I think that with the level of clearance that this planet has, that the crime that they're committing would be a high level crime, because I think trying to get a message outside of the planet or to escape the planet would be probably some of their most serious crimes. So clearly, I think non-lethal force under their laws would have allowed them to use the stun guns.
Stephen, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree if their kind of their civic life is kind of intimately entangled with their kind of um, commercial or sort of business life. Like there, when those lines get crossed, there's often a little more flexibility for there to be restrictions on people communicating with each other and speech and that sort of thing. But wow, that is really antithetical to just sort of a democratic government, restricting people's ability to communicate ideas and reach out to people. You think of other systems of government, more authoritarian, like sort of like a China situation or something, where there's, controls on internet access to computer networks abroad, so that people can't easily get information to and from people outside of the country. That makes me think of that. But yeah, I guess if it is sort of just a company, of course, companies have an ability to restrict their trade secrets and all sorts of internal communications. It's not a government entity. Yeah, and like you said, Judge, the non-lethal force, like those stun guns, that just seem to incapacitate people immediately without excessive distress or discomfort. It seems that people kind of collapse, but they don't seem to be in a lot of pain or anything. So that would be a great tool to have. But in reality, tasers, of course, are um, very controversial for a lot of reasons. They can be very, if a person has sort of sensitive health situations, or if they're pregnant and the officers don't know, that can be really cause a lot of very serious injury or even death. And a lot of people say that tasers shouldn't be used except in situations where lethal force would be authorized, because it can be lethal in in sort of various, small percentage of of circumstances, but still. But yeah, it would be great if we could figure out a way to just stop someone without hurting them or touching them or doing anything that would cause any sort of distress or injury. Yeah, and I agree. It's if it is sort of a felony, if there's a risk, if, especially like a national security risk, that often like really trumps um, a lot of other protections and allows authorities to use force that would otherwise not be warranted. They might be able to use something like that for sure.
This strikes me as less of a company town and more of the Manhattan Project. Th- But it's a mint, which is weird because it's not the same scale as the Manhattan Project of where we're trying to build the atomic bomb and there's high security issues there, as opposed to this is Fort Knox being a secret venue type of situation. I'm sure there's the joke that gold isn't in Fort Knox right now. What is, and why is that still secret? West Wing made a lot of fun of that. And so again, it just makes you wonder because of the governmental interest in having an operational mint that is just on go and might have been on go for way longer than necessary. Like if there was, we place importance on continuity of government. So you don't have people who think that we're still operating under the Articles of Confederacy in some secret base that's just mining silver in the Appalachians. It's like, what do you mean we have a country since 1789? Like that kind of reaction of we've cut out all outside trade and no one's come in with a wagon since the 1770s. Like that kind of weirdness we just don't have. So again, it is an alien concept, but the idea of security procedures so you don't become an easy bombing target or source of invasion. I mean, like that, those are valid national security concerns. And if you do have a planet that you're mining, because I now have a strong suspicion Atten is a very big city, and it's just the city doing the mining operation in Mint because they haven't expanded out to other parts of the planet. This is whether it's like being in Manhattan or Chicago, like they're not, it's, on the scale of the planet, it's tiny. So they're just there with the big underground operation for mining gold to make a mint. So it's a really surreal, and that there's nobody on the outside that knows how to get there. Uh, because it's not like Palpatine went to town with, well, I now know how to fund Death Star 2. So again, it's a very surreal. Uh, and I don't know how much they're going to get into that, but it is fascinating. And you know, I understand the concept of making an arrest for it, and it's non-lethal force to subdue them. So like all that's kind of neat to see.
One
So
more thing I
yeah,
just want to add about that. It was curious that if they were sort of stopped, that they weren't then, I mean, we didn't see them get processed for any sort of proceedings, and they were free at the end of the episode. Like they weren't in jail or anything. So it's curious, like if they committed a crime or if they were being prosecuted for anything, but it didn't seem like it. So I was it even an
Yeah,
arrest? Like I,
they were just kind of back in a room where they were kind
yeah.
of see what was going on, and then we got the voice of the supervisor finally, which Stephen Fry playing the voice of the supervisor. Whether he
Oh, I
actually will
didn't get
then
that.
I got that from reading a blog afterwards, but
That's
and I
awesome.
recognized his voice, so I then had to search for like I know that voice, and it's in the credits, so it's not like one of those made up ones. But he was listed in the credits, and whether he's going to play the supervisor is another story altogether. But at least voice of yes, I'm a big fan, and he spells his Stephen just like you do. Um, so
Very good,
so
Steven. Yeah.
so I was yeah, it didn't seem like they were being booked to be held or thrown in the gulag. There very little seemed to be being done to the parents, and then yes, right away they seemed to be pretty free. So it is to be seen. Yeah, the more I see of the planet, I'm thinking that this was something in the early High Republic era. Um, or even before that. But yeah, the sheer amount of credits when we saw the mint scenes, it gave me, the crossbreed geekdoms. I kind of just got Ferengi thoughts of look at all that profit. And
Yes, yes. The wow. And in a little Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's like
yeah,
that's really big. Like that's
yeah.
going back a long ways.
And
I'm
and 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 when he asked how many more there were, um,
uh,
the
1038, so
yeah.
nearly 738.
Yeah, so it was again another ode to geekdom and to George Lucas was the amount of minds that were there was the THX movie that George Lucas was first credited with.
So this is where we would call in an expert witness, but someone to
Uh,
compute how long does it take, how big is the mint, how long does it take to mine that amount of and process the gold to become, the currency, to figure out how many years they've been at this. Because it's definitely centuries, if not over 1,000 years. Like they've been at this for a very long time. I'm
And
gonna take
it's
predating Yoda.
Yeah, and it seems like they've been waiting a long time for a Republic emissary to come because people who were there didn't have any idea that that park opened up into the hangar or
right,
the
only the
elevator.
droids kind of knew the procedure,
Right.
yeah, you would think that there would have been a safety valve. They would have said, okay, we have enough credits, we could stop doing this now. But yeah, it seems like it's been yeah, probably I'm thinking 800 years to 1,000 years since the last pickup. So there's a lot of Republic credits there waiting to be picked up.
Yeah, and
And the pirates would be happy to pick them all up.
yeah, but it's the other thing to consider is one that could crash the galactic economy. So there's that factor. But the other factor is they might not have crime as we understand it. Like everyone just follows the rules because no one wants to get stunned, which has a little bit of the, day the earth stood still vibe to it of, we have androids running around that can zap us, therefore we don't want to get zapped, therefore we have peace in our time in a controlled environment where you don't have population growth. It's like the right size, like the idea of like we don't have to expand, because if this has been around for 1,000 years, you think the city would be bigger, that they would have other suburbs that have grown out and you would have people doing other things, like here's the farm area. So again, it's a really um, I think it's a planned community. And
And it's got to be very planned to the level of procreation
yeah.
because there's no way that humanity wouldn't have expanded over the entire planet if it all wasn't controlled. Although, Nell has a pretty sizable family. Uh,
Yeah, three,
so
three.
it's very curious as to how and what, and I doubt very much the show is going to necessarily get into that unless there's some nefarious thing that happens to all of the extra people.
Is it like Snowpiercer, like that you can only have so many, or else the ecosystem's going to be thrown off. So it's just a really complex question on how do you maintain that level of society so you don't have too much population growth or too little. And it's like, well, now we don't have enough people to run everything. If the houses all match what we saw on the other planet, again, that looks like it was just dropped in, like mobile homes, down to the fact everything seems to match. Do the streets match? So again, it's a very weird, and I don't know if we'll get those answers. I don't know if anybody.
Unless when you fail your, or not fail, but if the test that you take in school, which gives you your job for life, if that test is an F, maybe something else happens to you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're like liquefied, like Soylent Green.
yeah,
Or you're on mine duty. You're a miner.
yeah. It's so much to consider. And I mean, one level that could just be the brilliance of the writers of like, hey, let's do this, see what happens, and we can fill in the blanks. Because it goes back to the original Star Wars of you fought in the Clone Wars, and we didn't hear about it for decades to fill in that blank. It was just the what? What was the Clone Wars? And it's not discussed for the other three movies.
And they
So
certainly have had a plethora of material from those two words.
yeah, I don't know how I feel about being 80 with details getting filled in. It's like, whoa, well, here we are. Uh Something from my middle-aged time that's now being put into pop culture. Like that would be weird. And now that I've said it, it's probably going to happen. We get a little bit of the pirate's life where Jod, Captain Silvo, they get to the at and it's a big gas ball and Brutus is like, "This ain't right. Kill him." Like so, like that was one no patience, and so like he fails the Kenobi test, like not a patient person, but he is a pirate. And Jod does keep his appearance up. He doesn't use the Force to get out of the airlock. So, like, at what point would he have, you know, shown his secret? But again, is that a capital offense? We got here. It's a big ball of scary gas that's a maelstrom, so you die. And your honor, you've dealt with sentencing. How's this
Well,
strike you?
I think it was a deferred sentence from the previous episode where he was kind of sentenced to death pending him telling the truth during his appeal, and when they arrived at the planet that was not at Aden, which turned out to be at Aden, just hidden. It was then the carrying out of the earlier imposed sentence that was deferred to this episode. So I think in the pirate code, it was the death penalty was being imposed for the misrepresentation that he made during the appeal in the episode prior.
Stephen, your thoughts?
Yeah, it struck me as sort of a suspended conditional delay of the imposition of his sentence, which of course in the first instance is probably maybe not it's unclear like why he has to die for what he did. Capital offenses are pretty much very reserved for very specific things. But yeah, he certainly didn't keep his word as far as Brutus could tell from their initial arrival in the system. But he certainly didn't, like you said, didn't have the patience to hear the plan or how to get through or penetrate the shield or the grid. So yeah, it's he was definitely hanging on by a thread there. That was very scary. And what like the whole death by airlock is kind of an irrational fear of mine. It's like a little triggering for that to happen in a show. But yeah, I avoid media generally that has death by airlock.
It's a horrible way to go in the vacuum of space. So that would be
Did
it's
you see
bad.
Sunshine by that movie? Chris Evans was in it about 15 years ago, maybe. There's a
Oh,
lot of like people being in the vacuum of space is very scary.
it's Event Horizon. I'm like, there's a ton of them where it's like it's a bad way to go for life forms like us. maybe Brutus wouldn't explode violently. I don't know, but it's a bad way to go. It's a bad way to go. Uh, yeah, no, thank you. So, which brings us to the Onyx Sinner gets there, and it's stopped. Now the our heroes have been on the, I mean, again, it's so 1980s vibes of like, they're playing ball and they're all friends and Fern saying nice things to Wim about, I'm glad you pushed the buttons. And, since her character arc has been yelling at him for, 6 episodes. So again, it's all good. And like, he's not thrilled with, I'm going to go home and have to take this stupid test. And I know what's outside now. And I'm going to be deprived, you know, a life, a life that I rather have as opposed to this. So the ship gets captured and it's pirates. I think this is pure piracy. Like, it's not like they're the Coast Guard doing a safety inspection. Like, there are reasons that ships get stopped. This is not one of them. This is pure, I think it's an illegal stop because the pirates are, well, they're their own culture. There's no lawful justification for them to capture another ship. It's, I mean, unless you can say that Jod had some claim of ownership. But I'm going with, possession is 9/10 of the law on this one. Your Honor, do you have thoughts on the capture of the Onyx Cinder?
I agree. I think this was purely an illegal piracy act. And arguably, he does not even know that this is the ship that he was the captain of because it now has a different look than the last time that he saw it. So, he's not arguably making a mistake in justification and thinking that this is his ship and he's just reclaiming it. So I can't really think of any legitimate reason for them to take the ship other than uh, being pirates, and that is what pirates do.
Stephen, your thoughts
Yeah.
on the pirate's life?
Yeah, stopping. First of all, this is a great. They're actually doing a piratey thing, which is really cool. But yes, of course, if the if two people's just regular people, one of them stops the other and detains them unlawfully, that's a crime and also a tort. And so yeah, that's certainly not anything excusable. But yeah, that onyx cinder. But can we just pause and admire how cool it looks? I was so glad to see more of it and the exterior of it this episode. It looks amazing. I'm so excited about the redesign.
Yeah, I can't wait for that model because it's not a toy, it's a model. I mean, I always take offense when my aunt says your figurines. It's like, no, those are action figures. Use the right term. They're not dollies. They're action figures. And it's also good to see that it has 8 engines. It has the quad four and then a smaller quad four. So for a total of 8. So so it can giddy up and go. But again, it's a very pretty ship. But this is full on piracy, which then brings us to them being brought into the hangar and the boarding that's about to take place. And a great question about self-defense and using the claw that now makes a lot more sense for loading credits. That seems to have a valid function now of pick up the crate of gold and put it in the hold. But is this valid self-defense? Because are they defending themselves? Are they defending the ship? Your thoughts, Your Honor?
Yeah, I think that this was definitely a ship that was designed to move and move fast and not get captured by pirates. And probably a better operator and a more experienced operator might have been able to escape the from the clutches of the pirate ship. But I think with regards to um, the the justification is it the core and all of that I think was designed to do what it did. So I don't really find any big problem with it.
Yeah, as
David?
far as as far as the kids knew, that was a non-lethal way of kind of preventing someone from getting on their ship. I mean, it's probably, I don't know if the contact grabbing someone like that is justified, but they certainly didn't intend for it to result in what it
In the later
resulted
action.
in. Yeah, poor Brutus. Um, so
Brutus not
yeah,
get an appeal.
no, he did
No
not.
appeal for Brutus.
No deferred sentence for Brutus, that's for sure.
So let's unpack those two issues because those are two good issues. I don't think this is defense of property. I think it's defense of themselves because their ship's been captured. Like, and so they are now in harm's way. And so like this is the castle doctrine of your Winnebago getting sucked into like a cargo ship. And what do you do at that point? Because you're now a prisoner. And the rules of self-defense when you're, like literally been kidnapped changes. So because it's not like you're home, you've been kidnapped, and I would say they've been kidnapped. So using the claw to defend themselves and trying to get leverage so that they could get out of there seems completely legit. Uh, but when Brutus has his old Yeller moment of like that is a little intense uh and highlights just what an evil schmuck Silvo Jod, whatever his real name is. Because that's murder. I mean, just cold-hearted murder of shoot someone point blank who is restrained. And at least Brutus doesn't beg for his life. He's not growling. He's put down. And there's a tonal shift after that of just how sinister Jude Law can play the character. Also, gotta love Jude Law for basically playing like five different characters in this. Well, okay, maybe three of that's just neat. So like he has good range and is really earning his paycheck. But it also highlights I don't think he's coming back. Uh, I don't think, I mean, sure, Anakin murders a room full of kids and, was a party to genocide and 20 years of a rampage, and he gets to go to Jedi heaven. Jod is pretty sinister.
In Star Wars, everyone can be reunited.
Yeah, it's like I don't know how at this point, but
And no one is dead until we see all of the the funeral and the funeral pyre.
yeah, yeah, because you could get cut in two and come back in an
Exactly.
anime.
Exactly.
The flesh wound.
Yeah, Jod clearly, made out all of the things that everyone said about him throughout the series, which is he will backstab you. It's not like they kept this secret, and he definitely committed a blank execution of Brutus, and arguably, anyone with the name of Brutus almost deserves to be executed, because it just, I'm a very pro Caesar person. The but definitely, I also got great Wizard of Oz vibes from the hook scene, when they were saying, don't come aboard. I thought that was a great tribute to the wonderful Oz.
Yeah, the distorted voice, that was cool.
Yeah, yes. They've done a nice little treatment with regards to nods to various things that make all of us geeks happy.
Yeah, it's kind of like also when Princess Leia was in disguise in Return of the Jedi and she had the whoosh helmet that
Yeah.
disguised her voice, made her sound scary. It's cool.
Someone who loves you. Yes. Oh, so beautiful. All right. The pirates have j- job succession that's alien to us. Killing the guy in charge does not mean you take the job. So, because a crime's taken place. And we don't operate that way. Again, it goes to the
Some
Caesar comment.
hostile takeovers would argue with you on that note.
Yeah, well, true, but generally when a hostile takeover. Like there are body bags. Like there's, uh, I mean, granted, we could go down the side of corporate law, but let's not to that detail. But yeah, it's pretty brutal. And takes back his captaincy, and that's just a little rough and just not how we do things. But it's how pirates can be perceived as having their code of conduct.
I was curious about how, I mean, obviously this is under a pirate's code. It's not under any sort of like civilized code or law or anything, but it was funny how he challenged Fern for the captaincy of the Onyx Cinder and just told her just to submit or to yield. Um, and he certainly didn't give that option to Brutus. That he perceived that Jod perceived Brutus's disloyalty as being so grave that he just couldn't be spared, and that the pirate code would allow that sort of just murder as opposed to asking them to yield if they concede the captaincy.
Although after killing Brutus, he does ask the rest of the crew if basically are any challengers to me. So, I kind of equate that with
Yeah.
the calling out of Fern.
Well, they also had such a history that I understand from a pirate perspective, while you would not want the clear and present danger to be in a cage or in a place to go like, you know what? It's good you're in charge. I will accept being a first mate. That's provided that Brutus overthrew him to begin with. You don't keep somebody like that around. Normally, you would fire them and they're escorted out the building, not summary execution. Because again, we just don't roll that way as a society. But we then have full on, like, kids are being held prisoner. We get the message from mom and dad, and moms, more moms than dads, and that are sending the message in this. But I will say, we got an 80s dad on a redemption arc. My money's on him. Like, that's just money's on the 80s dad on a redemption arc who realizes I was wrong not to listen to you. Huge concession. Come home. Like, so again, just really well done. But we then have Wim deciding to attack, which leads us to a fun property chain of command issue that you can't be a captain of two ships. Like if you're a commodore, which is the low-ranking admiral, or an admiral, you can be in charge of multiple ships, but each ship still has its own captain. And you're up in the admiral's bridge and you issue orders down. Like that's just, if we're going to play kind of the World War II model of how that in theory could work. Sure, you could get a big hat, but we then find out that Smee does have some like legal programming for being able to quote the quote code and say, well, you can't be captain of two ships, so this ship is unattested. Uh, I think Wim got out his claims he's fast enough because Jod smothers his mouth and claims it. Uh, you gentlemen, what do you think? Your Honor, you first.
I think when Jod um, claimed the other ship as its captain, that was now his ship. So that precluded him, if you buy into this pirate code of one ship at a time, from then saying that he's also the captain of the Onyx Cinder 2.0. So I think that Smee definitely did a very nice legal um, and rational argument within his program to come to the conclusion that he can help Fern and Wim and Neil and the kids that certainly have treated him better than Jod did, and he used that legal justification to do what he did, and clearly he knew that Jod would backstab and or remove his head for doing so.
I, Stephen, your thoughts?
Oh, I was just curious. I don't know anything about sort of maritime law, but I was curious that at the time of the sort of ownership dispute, the Onyx Cinder was still on board the pirate ship, correct? So
Yes.
I guess at what point would that Onyx Cinder or smaller, because there were other like kind of fighter craft that were on board the pirate ship that, obviously the captain of the bigger ship would kind of own, I suppose. So at where's the line where sort of an away craft that's part of a bigger vessel is its own ship or is part of the captaincy of a bigger vessel?
Thank you for asking that. This is the sort of thing that sailors have so much fun with. So, a boat can be carried on a ship. It's why submarines today are still called boats, even though they're the size of a World War II aircraft carrier. Because in the old days when submarines were new, they were carried out on a ship and lowered in the water and went off and did their thing. We've maintained that tradition in the United States of calling a submarine a boat, even though it really is a ship at this point in time. The type of boats that I'm used to, some of them are built like a little ship. It's like the same type of components, the same type of design, but on a
And
matter
that,
of scale, it's like 60 feet long as opposed to 300.
but
And
you
it's
would assume that like a vessel that's even like 60 feet long would require a crew to navigate, and you would have to have someone who was like its captain, even though
yep.
it's so yeah.
So the way the Coast Guard does captain's licenses is based upon gross tonnage. And you can have be a master for vessels less than 100 tons, vessels more than 100 tons. You could be rated for any ocean, you could be rated for inland. And so there's scale there. So while the size of the ship matters on whether or not it's a boat or not, a tugboat that's 90 feet long has a captain, or a pilot boat that goes out high speed to put a pilot, a licensed captain, to bring a ship into San Francisco Bay so it can drop off cars at Oakland. Like that, it's like they still have that chain of command. So even though you might be a small boat captain, it's still a small boat. And so the Onyx Cinder is its own vessel. It's not
Hmm.
dependent upon a mothership. It's not like, say, a landing craft
Right, like on a
that
cruise
would
ship
just,
where they take you into the port, right? Yeah.
or a lifeboat, type of thing. It's not a tender. It's its own ship, but just a smaller scale. So, yes, size does matter when it comes to vessels. However, that is its own independent ship. And that would be my argument. And Smee is correct with that position of like, oh, you can't have both. You could be again, you could be the Commodore, and this could be the pilot vessel that you send out, or a small recon type vessel. It's like, look at the Ghost. It's its own ship, even though, it stays on Home One. So, because again, Home One's a big ship, and the Ghost is a much smaller vessel. Or same with the Falcon. So that's my nerding out about vessels and captains. But you can't be captain of two vessels. Pick one.
Well, I'm
Uh,
glad to give you that opportunity to.
Things
That
I
was really
think about.
interesting. That was great. That was cool. And I love the idea of Smee being like an revved up protocol droid. It's like who has all the like manners and like knows all the protocol like a 3PO, but also is just a badass. It's best of both
Go-
worlds.
Going with the ghost analogy, what do you say that the Phantom is?
A tender,
A
because it's
tent.
a
Okay.
small fighter. So that'd be like having a captain's gig or a motor whaleboat on an aircraft carrier or a battleship, because it can't do a crossing by itself. It could go a distance, but it's gonna have to come back to Mama at some point, which is what the Phantom would fall in. Even though Phantom has greater range, but still at the end of the day, it needs to go home.
Yeah, and I think in the Star Wars universe that there's the distinction between a ship that's capable of hyperdrive on its own and one that's not. Like the TIE fighters generally did not have that ability, but X-Wings did,
Yeah.
even though they both were fighters with regards to the same. But that seems to be a distinction in many Star Wars stories as well.
It's like the Zeros did not have armor. Like they treated, we want to go fast and that will be our defensive mechanism, while American fighters were armored, and so it gets to the argument of we like survivability and we want our guys to come home. Um,
And any of us who have played the X-Wing and TIE Fighter video games know that although it was a lot of fun to fly the TIE Fighters, they did not have the deflector shields that the X-Wings did.
yeah, those things matter. And which was one of the comments about like from Resistance with the was a Griff about like, about caring about, your people. Maybe that's why we lost. Like, so his realization 30 years later of like, yeah, probably should have handled that differently. Show that you actually care about your shipmates. But this has, you know, Fern coming in and and yelling unclaimsies and claiming the ship just for kids and to throw all the pirates off. I laughed and cheered so hard when Jod gets cold cocked that it's such a beautiful scene with eye close enough. So beautiful, so Star Warsy. And it makes sense Jod had the helmet on because if he didn't, he'd be dead. Like at best, shattered jaw and drinking through a straw. Like he's alive because he put the helmet on. But that punch, oh, so beautiful. Shows that, Leia's comment about never underestimate a droid. Don't. Especially if you program them to have some personality and or the from the Mandalorian, a droid is how you treat it. And, the kids treated Smee well, and he imprinted on them as opposed to not doing that. So again, just such a beautiful scene. Such a beautiful scene. But again, close enough. That can be contract interpretation. Close enough. Your Honor, do you have thoughts on close enough?
Yeah, I thought that his legal analysis was quite pure, and Jod went into to into concussion protocol basically in light of all the football playoff games that are happening this weekend. And it was close enough for him to be able to justify it to himself. And he was certainly looking for the excuse to do that. And I think in a lot of things dealing with contracts, close enough can be close enough.
Yeah,
Substantial compliance. We're going to call
Substantial compliance, right. The legal
yeah.
word for close enough.
It seems like he was court sitting in equity as opposed to a king's court. It's like kind of deciding what was fair as opposed to what maybe was the letter of the law. And so I appreciated the distinction, the old English distinction between the
Yes,
the
definitely
ways.
within the spirit of the law as opposed to
Exactly. Yeah, it was
the
equitable, really.
yes.
Oh, it's so beautiful of like, nope, you guys are horrible. Like, you just threaten children. No. Like we don't do no. So and like they didn't kill all the pirates. I mean, like that would have been a dark turn. They throw them off the ship and they leave. Like that's, if we're gonna go with a game of equity, like they didn't murder people who were unconscious. So good on them. Good on them. We when Jod comes in, beheads 33, and we've seen droids get beheaded before. We've seen R2 blow up in the Clone Wars cartoon. Like KB can put them back together. Like he'll be back. Don't We're all gonna be okay. Uh, Snowball survived. We're all good. But there's full on menacing and threatening the children. Like there's, if not false imprisonment, perhaps torture because of threatening the parents in the way that he describes cutting up the parents. All bad. Like I mean, this is again why it's hard to see a redemption arc take place. Your thoughts on Jod and his actions towards the youth.
Yeah, there's no argument that could be made to say that this wasn't endangering the children, both their mental and physical um, well-being, because it clearly was. But I still argue that anyone can be redeemed, and we have not heard his horrible backstory, whether he's a survivor of Order 66 or his parent was a survivor of Order 66. There's going to be at some point we will learn his story as to why he is the way he is, and that'll lean towards the eventual redemption. Although I'm fine with non-redeemable characters in Star Wars, it does not ever seem to be the way that they go.
Yeah. And maybe the redeemable one was 33.
Mm,
Like it's like, yeah, I'm not following the law that closely on this. It's good enough. So off we go.
yeah.
Stephen, your thoughts on
Well, it just struck me this sort of shocking level of uh the fact that the authorities, such that they are on Ad-Aden, just didn't seem to blink an eye when some rando showed up out of the blue with four children who had been reported missing. Like, they didn't ask any questions about that, about like where you found them, like why are you with them, like what has happened. At the minimum, in real life, the children would have been separated from that person and taken to some sort of place where they could be questioned and asked if anything had happened to them. And so it just strikes me that, again, just going back to the parents being arrested but not being prosecuted or visibly, investigated for any sort of unlawful activity. It just seems like at Aden, as long as the mint functions are happening, they don't really care about any other sort of crimes that are going on as long as everything is running smoothly. It's so interesting.
I was very surprised, with a planet of this level of security, that there wasn't, some kind of something that had to be shown to these droids to prove that he was an emissary of the Republic. And the only way I can get around that in my head is the ship itself is your badge. And just being there with the ship, which is how the other pirate was able to get through all the defense mechanisms of Ad-Aden, so that if you show up in that ship, their program that you're the emissary, you're going to load that ship, and we follow through with that programming, no questions asked. So that's the only thing that I can think of to get to that level.
Yeah, it's a weird combination of hubris and naivete, that they're so confident in their security systems that they can't imagine that someone would capture one of their ships and be able to perpetrate a fraud on them. And yet there they are in this terrible situation because they haven't thought to ask any follow-up questions or ask for ID.
yeah, it is mind blowing, and it's the failure of imagination is why there are security failures. Pearl Harbor was a failure of imagination. Like Kimmel and Short each went in opposite directions with the warning memo. Putting all the warnings together for 9/11, you know, like we didn't have the connective tissue between the different agencies for them to pick up on what was happening. This asking for ID as opposed to he's in the ship, it has to be our guy, despite the fact it's been like 1,000 years since we've seen one of these people. Like you ask questions, or again, the kid issue. Hey, those kids don't look right, and none of them are saying anything. None of them are asking for their parents. I'm sure there's nothing going on here.
It's fine. Yeah, show them to the vault. It's great.
Yeah, it's cool. What I mean, we don't need to see your identification. What? Like it is such a whiplash moment of like a complete failure of I'm sure this guy is meant to go to the Pentagon. He showed up in the right car. No, like just no. There's got to be multi-factor authentication in order to get in. It can't just be I'm in the right spaceship.
And it might just be sort of a throwback to the old Republic era when the Jedi were kind of keeping the peace and everyone felt really secure and that there was no, reason to anticipate anyone doing anything bad, or there to be any sort of ill will. And so maybe just reflects maybe a Garden of Eden time as opposed to like after the fall when people have, nefarious motives.
Right? All kinds of options here. Uh, so the idea that the supervisor is a droid. There's another pop culture reference where the guy who was in charge died and the droids just kept carrying on. Is Sky Captain the World of Tomorrow, a Jude Law movie? So I'm curious if that's we'll find out that again it's Wizard of Oz
I
type.
mean, we did hear from the supervisor, so there is either they took on the supervisor role. The supervisor might have always been an AI from the beginning,
Beginning.
um, or and it's hard to imagine the droids creating a supervisor that was the supervisor. Um, I'm very curious as to how that's going to work out. I think we're at least going to learn that in, in the finale.
Yeah, it's they've just been carrying on in a functional society that isn't growing, doesn't have crime, and if there's no external influence for change, like the cloud collapses and your defense satellites are gone and you have death to management, okay, that's how you get civil war. On the flip side, if everything's chugging along, people have health care and jobs and everything's fine.
Well, those other planets might be an example of what happens when it went wrong.
Yeah, yeah. And that something breached and the society collapsed. Like that seems to be the vibe here. So, but we have, it ends with, Jod approaching the reunited families and draws and ignites the lightsaber. It's like brandishing a weapon at someone.
Chekhov's lightsaber.
Yeah, and again, will he attack parents? Like what's going, on here? Because he can't conquer the planet by himself. So even if he tries taking hostages, the droids outnumber them. Like he can't stop all of them. Somebody will get a lucky shot. Even if he's been trained at a lightsaber, it's been decades since he's handled one. So if he was a youngling or an inquisitor, that then eventually became a pirate, like it could have been decades since he's had a lightsaber. Uh,
Sure, it's just like
well,
riding a bike though.
yeah, it's I haven't played baseball since elementary school. I'm sure it'd be fine. I'm sure I won't throw out my back. I'm sure everything would be a-okay. And I could hit the ball. I mean, that's a lot of faith. You learned it when you were 9. Are you still good at age 50? You know, what could go wrong? Do you remember the song flute in 3rd grade? Can you play anything for us right now? Again, 3rd grade was a long time ago. Uh, no, no, don't ask me to get out a recorder. So,
I
uh,
was very happy to see when I started to coach my son's teams, and granted, this is now, still 15 or so years ago, that when I went, into the batting cage and would do practices with them, that I still did remember how to catch, how to throw, how to hit. So yeah, I think muscle memory, if you did it enough, stays with you. I don't know if I would be as good on the field with the bum knee that I now have, which is why I've now pivoted to pickleball with the rest of my generation. But he seems to hold the lightsaber and move it in such a way that shows he knows what he's doing. I foresee him attempting to take the children and the parents hostage, and that failing miserably when the droids stun all of them or something along those lines. But we will see.
Yeah, he's really good at getting captured. He's really good
Yes.
at overplaying his hand and failing, so that we've seen that a couple times now. So while he did take off 33's head with a fair amount of grace that shows skill, you know, he can't stop all of them. And as soon as you go for one droid, the alarm will sound like they're like if they're able to stop all the parents with a communication device, they'll take down a dude with a lightsaber. He's not going to be the king of the planet uh, by tea time. So that said, uh, the brilliant episode got dark fast and heck of a ride. Either of you have any closing comments?
Or predictions. I'm
Uh,
curious as
Mm,
to your predictions for the finale. Part of me thinks that the kids aren't going to want to live on at Aden and might voluntarily, along with Jod, become the skeleton crew on a future adventure, which will lead us to season 2. But it's hard to see, if they're going to write an ending that automatically leads to a season 2, or are they going to lead it iffy whether we're going to get a season 2 or not?
yeah,
Steven?
that's a good question. I think I've seen some folks speculating that there'll be a cameo in the final episode that might tie this into the Filoniverse final film somehow.
It's
So although
Disney. There's always ties.
there's always a
There's
tie-in.
no doubt that there'll be something that'll be tied into especially now that David Filoni is kind of the uber czar of the Star Wars universe, which I love because he really knows his stuff. So I think there's going to definitely be some kind of tie, whether it's as overt as we're going to, see Grogu come down and rescue all of them or not. I don't think so,
Yeah,
but it's going to be interesting to see.
there's always synergies.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll see. I'm excited.
Yeah. Carson makes sense. Well, we've seen multiple X-Wings, and X-Wings taken out the pirate ship, or if the top of the school has a cannon to shoot said pirate ship down, I see that happening. Or because I don't see them using the cannon to shoot down the Onyx Cinder, because one, we did see we have seen merchandising get blown up before. However, that would be a little rough because we barely know the ship. Two, uh, yeah, I don't think it's going to get Razor Crest. But I do have a suspicion we'll have an 80s ending, and that whether the kids go off on a new adventure or they have the option of going off on a new adventure, or the supervisor sends them to go, okay, go check in for us. Uh,
Or does
because
something happen to the defensive grid that forces them to join the world?
yeah, and they're they could crash the economy. Like that's the thing that's a little weird. The book 2061, which was the follow-up to 2010, which was the follow-up to 2001, when Jupiter imploded and became the star, at its core was a diamond. And thus diamonds became very, very commonplace throughout our solar system. And so the diamond market changed exponentially because it was a common item. If you have over 1,000 vaults that have that much, gold in them, what effect would that have on the galactic economy? Do you just sit on it so you don't crash it? Because you don't want something that's very rare to suddenly become very common. Uh, how's that going to work out? Um, so, I mean, there's speculation all over the map from this is, first order funding to,
The,
uh,
the First Order did need a lot of funding to turn a planet into a Death Star.
Yeah.
So it could well be that this might have some play into the First Order founding.
Mm.
Or it goes to the naivete of the New Republic of like, we got cash, we don't need to have a navy. Uh, we're good. So again, a couple ways it could play out. Or they just continue being a Neverland and not interacting with the rest of the galaxy. So let's find out. But I have confidence that Wendell will do something heroic because again, he's the 80s dad on a redemption arc. They step up. Think of Cloak and Dagger with again, the dad steps up. That's a common theme in 80s movies. The parent who's concerned about his job and, not being the best parent will find a way to be helpful. Will go save their kid. They realize that their kid's the most important thing. So that's what I expect. Something sentimental with parents. So with that, everyone, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back. I encourage people to have watch parties and have fun when the last episode comes out, or get everyone together to watch all 8 together. Enjoy that moment. So everyone, thank you for tuning in. Stay safe, stay healthy, help those who need help, and we'll see you soon. Take care.